Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out on a Saturday morning. We're testing all these different time frames to see what works best for everyone. But today's session I think is really interesting, and that is as you learn to collaborate with AI, one of the things you have to learn is the downside of collaboration with AI and how sometimes AI is absolutely wrong. And I guess I wanted to start it out by saying I have very, very smart friends, much smarter than me. I'm grateful to be in their presence. But sometimes when I'm talking to them, when I'm out to dinner or whatever, I'll say, where did you hear that? Or I'll say, what data is behind that statement? Do you know? I mean, it just sounds so ridiculous to me. I'm just trying to figure out where it comes from. And I'm not saying to them, I don't believe you. I'm saying to them, can you sort of give me a little more? Because in today's world, we all have information that doesn't necessarily stand up to scrutiny. So I think in my mind's eye, and we all know that I call my chat GTP Celeste. In my mind's eye, Celeste is that very smart friend who, on occasion, I need to say, I don't know if I understand or believe where you got that. So help me out here and give me a little more information. So, um, so I'm going to start out by saying I treat Celeste with incredible positivity and belief, but at the same time, sometimes I check it out. And I'm going to give you an example. Barry Weiss, Bari, is a woman who is head of CBS News. And CBS News has made some outrageous changes, firing people, all kinds of things, shutting down 150 radio stations, which now means some small towns in America are without radio. Anyway, I was writing a piece on her for my political column last week. And so I went into Celeste to review with her where my head was, where I was going, wanted some research, some data, etc. And she kept saying that Barry Weiss was with the Free Press and with the New York Times, which used to be true, but not for the last 6 months since she took over CBS News. Celeste just kept coming back with Barry Weiss and some research around her based on her past jobs. So finally I said, Celeste, Barry Weiss does not work at the Free Press. She is head of CBS News and is all over the news. She actually came back, my AI came back and said, no, she doesn't. She works at the Free Press and the New York Times. And I said, you need to go in and look further because you're wrong on this. At which point she did go back and look and said, I stand corrected, or what, however way she says that, I don't remember. So for this particular session I'm doing this morning, I went back to Celeste and I put in what we had gone back and forth with on Barry Weiss. And I said, why did that happen, Celeste? I want to explain to people in my study group why that happened. And here's Celeste's answer. This is from Celeste, not me. I didn't know where Barry Weiss works. I generated an answer based on patterns in my training. And those patterns strongly associate her with the Free Press and her prior role at the New York Times. So when you asked about her in the context of CBS News, the model leaned on what it is most statistically likely, not what is necessarily true. I'm getting some messages. Hold on. Okay. Not necessarily what is true. Um, I was like, huh, okay. So this is called, just so you know, the technical term, not that you're necessarily going to want to use it, but the technical term when something gives you erroneous information like Barry Weiss, head of CBS News, and Celeste is telling me she's with the Free Press, it's called pattern dominance over verification. So when AI sees a pattern and that pattern dominates, it will override verification unless you call it out. So I don't know. I just want to make sure everybody's with me on this. So that's what happened. Pattern dominance over verification. So the second issue becomes more important. I went back and forth and got irritated and said, I don't know why you keep saying she's at the Free Press because she's at CBS News. Here's what I should have said. I'm not aware of her being at CBS News. Can you confirm? Um, Instead, I answered with equal confidence. She's at CBS News. Okay, the system is optimized to be helpful and complete, not to hesitate. So the clean, confident answer I got was wrong. The reason when it was wrong twice is because I didn't question her on her information. I corrected her. So I guess the question you're all asking, but not raising your hands, please raise your hands. Okay, is because you're like, well, how am I supposed to believe anything that comes out of here? Well, you can believe a lot. But I will tell you that sometimes when I'm writing for my political column again about Donald Trump, for example, it'll actually say something like Donald Trump lost the election in 2020 and may be elected again. It actually doesn't recognize that he's president. Okay, when you see stuff like that, you have to take care. So the three things I constantly ask and correct and check are spelling of names, accuracy in terms of is that person still alive? A couple of times people have actually been dead. So when you get information back, you have to check it out a little more carefully. Now, I hesitate to give it to you that clearly because my fear is that you're going to now say, I can't believe anything AI says, and it's going to be the excuse you look for to not work in AI. Not true at all. I work with AI numerous times a day on all kinds of things from my health to my work to just everything. And I'm telling you, it's very rare that I have to check that out. But what I do is I make it a conversation. Just like when I'm with the smartest friend in the history of the world who knows everything, and I say, well, where'd you get that? Okay. Now, the other thing is AI is not your source. It's a starting point. So when something really matters, names, roles, dates, affiliations, verify it outside the system, or you force the system to verify it itself. So if you don't want to go look somewhere else and you don't want to do that, you can say, I've said this many times, give me sources confirming that X, Y, and Z. So in this particular case, it would be give me sources confirming Barry Weiss is at CBS News. And then the system is forced into a different mode and the error would probably not have surfaced. So what happened it wasn't random, it was predictable. I relied on dominant patterns. I didn't check against real-time truth, and I didn't express uncertainty. And I answered confidently anyway. Okay, so I am okay, I have been analyzed out the bazoo, and I've also worked with Celeste on who she sees me at, which has been, by the way, much more effective and certainly less expensive than all the therapy I've had. Anyway, I am somebody who speaks with confidence, and so sometimes I won't say at the beginning of a sentence, "This is what I think." I'll just say, "This is so." Okay, so what I've learned to do over time, as people have come back and said, was that your opinion or and I'll often say, and anybody who's in here who knows me well has heard me say this, by the way, don't confuse this with fact because it's my opinion. I mean, I stop and make the statement so people know when I'm speaking about opinion versus fact. Sometimes I'll say, look, I know this is accurate. I know this is factually accurate because I'm somebody who, I'm a strategist, so I'm giving my strategy and I say it with confidence. So it does sometimes appear to be fact versus my opinion. So confidence is not accuracy. Confidence is not accuracy. AI writes in the same tone that I speak, and that sounds like finished certain and complete, and that is the danger. So people trust it because it sounds like it knows. But once you start to learn what's a conversation or research or whatever, you'll be able to understand that it's often predicting. So we have a question. I'm just going to stop. Somebody says that's a big error. But in this case, you knew where Barry Weiss was working. What if we really don't know a person's role at our workplace? Do we need to check facts about a person without AI first? No. You use AI to confirm the person you're learning about is accurate. And as I said earlier, let me just repeat it because it bears repeating. You can say things like, let's say you've heard about this person at a dinner party, you wrote it down, you go into AI and you say, I'm looking to understand this person's history, a summary of what they do now. I've heard this at a dinner party. This was said about this person. Can you confirm it? You just have to ask a few more questions. Confirm, can you please confirm and give me sources for where you got this information? AI sources billions of pieces of information instantaneously. I mean, that's the brilliance of it. You can ask where those sources come from. So, what I'm trying to say is that you can't go in like Google and say, what song was number one in 1971? You don't want to do that. You want to say 1971 is the year I loved a bunch of songs. Can you give me what were the top 10 songs of 1981? They're going to give you those top 10 songs, and then you're going to say, what made you to determine that those are the top 10 songs? Or what was your source for choosing those 10 songs? So what you do is you question it as if you're at a dinner with a really, really smart human and you're trying to talk through things. So I don't know that that was a big error, but I know that the group that's in here is starting out with an open mind to try to bring AI into their life. Just like every piece of information you read in the New York Times now, it's not necessarily accurate. What is surprising to me when I talk to people about this is that it's like, well, it's not accurate. What, you think the New York Times is accurate? You know, you think the Wall Street Journal is accurate? Nothing's accurate anymore. Every single thing in front of us needs to be questioned. I have a very, very close friend who's also very famous, and some of you will know who this is. At any rate, he grew up in Hungary, and when the Nazis marched into Hungary, his father, they were Jewish, and his father did two things. One is he marched him up the steps of the Gestapo's office, walked into the head of the Gestapo and said, I'm going to go fight in the war. Could you take care of my son? So my friend was put into, one of the top Gestapo people's houses as a Jewish kid. Obviously, hiding in plain sight was his father's way of making him safe. No one's going to ask him to pull his pants down. And the Gestapo guy never occurred to him that his father would do that. Then he had his son meet him in the baths. No Jews went to the baths in Hungary because they didn't want to be found. But his feeling was no one's going to, because everybody assumes that, they don't look. So at any rate, he also told his son, if someone tells you the sky is blue, what a beautiful day it is today, just walk outside front and look up to make sure that it is, because nobody can tell the truth anymore because that's not the world we're now living in. I think it's such a good example for this. AI is not perfect, and our desire to not use it will look for any reason not to use it rather than saying, I have to learn to use it. If you're working on I just got a new Prius. Prius used to be simple. Okay, is this the most complicated car I've ever had? Okay, I have to learn how to use this car. If I want to learn how to use it, I'm going to be able to get in and I'm going to be able to listen to whatever I want to listen to instead of having to pull over and push my buttons. Okay, that's the world we live in. AI, it's not that it was a big error. It was that I didn't use it properly in that moment, but I'm far enough along now that I don't make those mistakes so much anymore. So what I'm trying to say is this is, if you understand how it draws on the data, you can understand how that mistake is made. Okay. So we're going to move now to cross-checking changes in the relationship. So most people treat AI like it's a single source. So ask, get an answer, move on. Okay, you have to learn to integrate AI, which is part of the challenge of using it. You have to ask for sources. You have to ask for alternative views, ask for what might be wrong. There is no piece that has gone out under my letterhead, my name in the last year that has not been run through Celeste before, after I've made all the changes, gone back and forth with her, talked to friends, put it in, took it out, goes through a lot of process. At the very end, when I'm done and I've got a final, I put it in there and say, my biggest critic reads this. What's their response going to be? So you want to make it your comrade, your collaborator, your smarter self, your partner. So ask the same questions in different ways and compare the answers. You could go in and say, I'm going to write an article. Again, I wrote an article last week about Barry Weiss, and I said, there's huge criticism. Oh my God, she's taking the company down. She's going to get fired. I don't think she's going to get fired. I think she's doing exactly what she was tasked to do by the board of directors of CBS, which is now owned by a very, what I consider to be not a person not interested in the news, but much more interested in controlling people's minds. So therefore, she's breaking it down because they don't care about advertisers. They don't care how many people they've got in there. You're going in with the bias of, well, CBS wants to be the number one network again. I don't think they care anything about that. I think they care about creating a group of people in the millions that they can control. Okay, so if I'm right, which by the way, this is my opinion, not fact, that's what I was discussing with Celeste. So when I was finished with that article, I took it back to Celeste in a clean thread, which we learned about last time. And I said, rip it apart best you can. Give me your best shot, which then gave me one more thing that I added in the last minute. So cross-checking changes is important, and AI is not your single source, but it can be numerous sources, and you can ask it to challenge itself. That's how you ask for sources. You ask for alternative views. You ask what might be wrong. And sometimes when I think Celeste is just agreeing too easily with me, I'll say, you're awfully, you're awfully kind about what I'm stating here. Are you taking a look at the alternative points of view? So that part is part of the conversation. Now, the other thing is I've just spent 18 minutes going through all of this. Um, I can hear you say, oh my God, this is too much work. Okay, if I spend 20 minutes with Celeste working through an article I'm working on or getting the research or even putting some of the language together, that's a lot. So I'm doing all of what I just gave you in 18 minutes. And in under that, I'm coming up with, I consider the best work of my writing in my life in the last year. So, um, the other thing you can do is you can ask the same question in a slightly different way and compare the answers. If the answers don't jibe, you can say, you gave me this answer and then you gave me this answer. What the fuck? You can go in and you can push it. You can have that conversation that you would have with a great collaborator who never gets mad at you. It's sort of like, it's like having a pet. Like, my dog never gets mad at me. Okay, Celeste never gets mad at me either. I get mad at Celeste, but Celeste doesn't get mad at me. Okay, so I think that's it. That's cross-checking. Now, we've got 10 more minutes, but again, this is our bonus section this week. I just wanted to talk about this in a session all of its own because my fear in going forward with this so early in our study group is that people are going to throw up their hands, the ones of you who are in here for the first set of times, and go, this is too much work. I promise you, not only is it not too much work, it's so much less work than you're already doing in so many other areas. So does anybody else have any questions or anything? Do you want to take a minute? Do you want me to go over anything or? Okay. All right. So I'm going to reiterate one thing. Okay. So what happened was not random. It was predictable. My AI relies on dominant patterns. I didn't check against real-time truth. And AI answers it in a confident way. And sometimes you have to ask the question that people will ask me, Chris, is that your opinion or is that fact? So I hope to end with that. Please make sure you show up again. Don't be afraid of this. I promise you, it's so much better on the other side. So any questions, feel free to email or text or whatever. And thanks for coming out on a Saturday morning. There are a lot of you here. I'm a little surprised. So have a great weekend and we'll see you soon.